The Houston Texans have made some major moves so far this free agency, and now it's time to recap how that affects their 2025 draft outlook. My name's Tyler, here with my brother Ryan. We're going to do another 3-round mock draft for you here in a second. Before we do that, be sure to subscribe to the Tracy Take, tackle that bell, and leave a like and a comment. Let us
Mhm.
know what you think of the draft. Ryan, let's pull this up here. So,
Let's do it.
the Houston Texans fans, you're going to find out kind of really Ryan and my thoughts overall on their primary need come this April here. And so, trade Laramie Tunzel, that was a big shift overall. They do have Blake Fisher, and then they do also have Titus Howard as a whole as well, who they ended up drafting. Blake Fisher last year. And so, that being said, I still think they're going to want to have some more tackle depth as well, some guys they can go and develop, especially too because primary number one is you got to be able to protect CJ Stroud. Last year,
Yeah.
he was running around for his life, I feel like, at a lot of times. And so, did he regress a little bit? Yes. The offense regressed a little bit. Yes. But there were also some pretty key injuries overall as a whole. I think that started that. And then just the depth of the interior and now questions on the exterior as well are going to be up for debate. So, we have them going Kelvin Banks here, left tackle out of Texas, create some competition as a whole overall with that tackle spot between him, Blake Fisher, and Titus Howard. Kelvin Banks might still need some development overall. So maybe this is still something you roll with and you try and develop Kelvin Banks throughout his rookie year and then potentially have a Blake Fisher, Kelvin Banks tackle rotation. Let's see how Titus Howard does. But that was kind of our initial thoughts as a whole. There's other offensive linemen too that they could end up taking. But Ryan, want to throw it over to you here. What do you like about Kelvin Banks here going to the Texans?
Yeah, he has the requisite length, he has the power. I think his biggest thing is he just has some technique things that he needs to round out. He has a good anchor, but he can sometimes get thrown off balance. And then when edge rushers came at him, like Michael Williams, with like elite length, that was when he kind of started to struggle. And so I feel like of all the tackles on the board, getting Calvin Banks, he was the top one. You go look, Josh Simmons maybe if was healthy would be a better tackle, but I think just the injury concerns there are push him down a little bit. Josh Connerly really has trouble with his anchor, and then Ariante Ursary just doesn't quite have the bend or the refinement that Calvin Banks does to this point in his career. So I think that's the best, not just tackle but offensive lineman on the board. And so I feel like getting him here is really good value. I think he should be a top 20 pick, but he kind of falls just due to some of those issues there. But yeah, they put themselves in a situation where they have to hammer offensive line. And one of the things that about hammering offensive line is you got to at least double dip in the top 100, especially when you have 4 picks. And so Jonah Savaiinaea, the offensive lineman from Arizona, he was the right tackle. He projects better to kick into guard and just be a really powerful guard. He's probably the strongest offensive lineman in this class. And the way he can just move people in the run game, I think, is really impressive. He has quick enough feet, especially on the interior, to mirror defenders in pass rush situations. And so I feel like that you get him and Kelvin Banks, it could be your left tackle, your left guard. That's a lot of power on that left side, but it's also, I think, a pretty good pass blocking tandem as well.
Yeah, yeah, and this is one they did sign Laken Tomlinson to a very small deal. He's slated as of right now, according to our lads, as the starting left guard. They traded for Ed Ingram in a pick swap. It seemed like oh no, just in exchange for a 2026 6-round pick. But he's slated as of right now to back up to Juice Scruggs at a right guard position. So once again, it's getting more competition in there. Very little commitment overall to Tomlinson or Ed Ingram as a whole. Maybe even you could say more commitment to Ed Ingram just because it did cost you a pick. While, if we're being honest, a couple
Yeah.
$1 million to salary cap on a 1-year deal isn't the worst thing in the world overall to these teams here. And so even though I know Texans don't have the best salary cap situation, if I'm not mistaken. So, but getting a guy like Savaiinaea as well, I think would be huge. A couple other routes they could end up going on the interior that I believe you mentioned already, but Charles Grant, Wyatt Milam. But they want to address the interior in a different spot. I really do like CJ West coming in here and helping out, especially in that run stuffing defense. Something similar, I think, to how we projected Mason Graham going to Jacksonville, but getting a solid defensive tackle in there with how great Will Anderson is, how great Neil Hunter is. You can get solid defensive linemen on the interior there. is I think that would be a great addition also. They have signed Sheldon Rankins. Then they do still have Tim Settle, but I think also too get some more youth in there, I think is a good way to help keep building for the future, especially too with how young Will Anderson is. That could be a very interesting
Yeah.
tandem. They get CJ West. So they did trade obviously Laramie Tunzel, and with that they exchanged the their fourth round pick for the Washington Commanders' third round pick here. And so this is where we mix things up a little bit, get a little bit more depth in the running back position as well. Damian Pierce is coming in on his last year of his contract as a whole, and Joe Mixon, he's not the forever guy also too. So our thought process was you're investing heavily in protecting CJ Stroud. Let's also get him a good young running mate to go along with this. Move on from Damian Pierce, then get ready for life post Joe Mixon, who did have a good year last year, yes. But so a guy like Kaleb Johnson can come in and he can be your 3 down back guy. Very big physical guy, but can also catch out of the backfield as a whole. I think that would be very interesting
Yeah.
as a whole. And my apologies also too for the typo. It is Johnson, not Joe Sanan. And so I just want to make that very clear. And so,
uh the big thing here is I think you just invested in the 2 previous picks in a powerful left tackle and a powerful guard. So now why don't you go get a powerful runner and really help yourself out? Now Caleb Johnson can be a home run hitter, but you can really help yourself out here in some short down situations and really take some of the pressure off of CJ Stroud. And then I also think about going and closing games out. The Texans have been in a lot of close games over the last couple years, and I feel like they could really be able to start to wear down some defenses with just the power that these first 3 picks would bring. And so, speaking of power, I'm going to go on to the next pick here, which is the Texans' true third round pick, the pick 89. We're going to get Emory Jones, the guard. Well, he was the right tackle at LSU, but he's going to kick in and be a right guard at the NFL level. But I'm not a huge fan of potentially moving Juice Scruggs out to right guard. He was drafted as a center out of Penn State. I feel like he should stay there. And I think you get Emory Jones Jr. Like Jonah Savaiinaea. I feel like his power and his punch, you can really just see how it affects defenders when he's able to get his hands on them. And so I feel like throwing him in the mix there with these other 3 picks that were made before, that is, you have totally changed the mindset of this offensive line. This is going to be a downhill running game. I think you go and look at this division. The Titans are the only team that has a good front. Jeffrey Simmons is getting older. They just move on from their 2 or from Harold Landry. They're having some changes up front on that defensive side. The Colts do not have a solid defensive front, and the Jaguars do not have a solid defensive front at the moment. And so I really just think they could be able to impose their will with this offensive line and Caleb Johnson on the rest of this division and the rest of the NFL. And so I really like this draft for the Houston Texans going forward.
yeah, very pointed on that offensive line, and maybe it's a little overkill. With that being said, though, too, is you gotta be able to protect CJ Stroud as a whole. I mean, because we're seeing now quarterbacks and how long their careers are. You don't want to see him getting hurt and banged up, especially
Yeah.
going into just his 3rd year. And so, if there's one thing, maybe just kind of thinking about it, they maybe could have gone receiver at one of those picks. I really like Jonah Savaiinaea, but if Emory Jones is sitting there at 89.
Mhm.
Maybe at 58, you go and get Savion Williams. You maybe go and get a Jack Bash because that's going to be a big need for the team. No, you traded for Christian Kirk. You did just sign Justin Watson and Braxton Berrios, but those are 4th, 5th, 6th receivers as a whole. I think you can go and get one of those guys if they want to go a different route. But at the time that we did this
Yeah.
mock draft, because we did it kind of like right before the legal tampering period and things opened up, so it took some time to get everything built out.
Yeah.
I think, but like potentially they can end up going receiver here. That being said, though, it's such a big need. You got to get it right. And so once we get that right, then you can really start addressing things overall. And I think this is going to be the draft class to kind of go and do that. So,
Yeah.
but we'll have to see. Texans are in a very interesting spot. I love what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball. I think they're great there. Maybe they'll get some more linebackers when it comes to like day 3 picks. But I think it's going to be offensive line just hammering that as a whole in
Yeah.
the first 2 days.
Yeah, and maybe I think you're right. Maybe we went a little overkill. I think they definitely should triple dip at that offensive line position or unit as a whole. But maybe they're using it instead of taking Savaiinaea, they're taking a wide receiver there. Instead of taking Jones, they're taking a wide receiver there, and then they're taking another offensive lineman later on day 3. But with that being said, protecting CJ Stroud should be priority number one. Um, to get into a larger discussion on a whole that we can save maybe for another video, I cannot believe that they actually traded Laramie Tunsil and what they're doing with this offensive line. I thought they would be adding to this offensive line, not stripping it to the studs and hoping to rebuild it all in one offseason. So I think it's a very interesting strategy by the Houston Texans, especially when you've won a wild card round playoff game. You were pretty close to actually hanging with the Chiefs and potentially coming out with that game this last year. And so I feel like it's just been an interesting offseason for the Chiefs or for the Texans, moving on from Bobby Slowick, and now all the offensive line changes as well. So
Well, and we're really going to see the benefits of that trade after next year's draft
yeah.
because they got a second round pick and a fourth round pick from Washington in next year's draft. So that's where it's going to be interesting to see because, like, so this year, like, who are they going to get? They really only move up 20 spots, yes. But next year, though, they
Yeah.
get a lot more draft capital. And that's where I think if they focus heavily on the offensive line, which that seems like that's going to be the route they end up going here, or I believe that they are going to end up going. If they get that right, and they throw a lot of pieces there, they get their offensive line. Then next year you can have a lot of focus on getting more weapons and maybe addressing other parts of the defense as well. So,
Mhm.
but that's my strategy overall. But I'm not currently employed by the Houston Texans, so
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter come
Yeah.
draft night.
Well, if these changes don't work out, some Houston Texans employees might no longer be employed by the Houston Texans. So we'll just
Maybe
have to
so.
see. But let's go ahead. Let's wrap up this video here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. That is the best way to help out the channel. While you're down there, leave a comment on what you thought of this Texans 3-round mock draft. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you have done differently? Other than that, we'll see you guys next time.